ever had to die in order to live? Maybe you think you're good. Does someone here know what it's like to have your temple destroyed, only to be replaced with something that is much better? Has your bad news ever become good news in one way or another?
Well, hey, Good Shepherd. Welcome to this week's edition of Refresh. And we are going to be looking at our sermon from last week that Pastor Pat preached. And in the gospel that last week, there's this kind of challenging story about Jesus and the disciples are in Jerusalem. It's the last week of Jesus's life. And the disciples are in awe of these big buildings that they're seeing, the big stones that, are in the temple. And they're commenting to Jesus, and Jesus kind of throws some shade their way. And he says, hey, do you see these big buildings? Well, the time is coming when these big buildings are going to be destroyed. And which, of course, is shocking to the disciples. But Jesus then throws in a twist, and he says, not only are these buildings going to be destroyed, but there's going to be wars and famines. So all of these challenges that are coming, you said a couple of times, that Jesus can bring beautiful things from the dust of our lives. Or that you said very plainly that Jesus, sometimes things need to die before Jesus can bring resurrection.
Right.
And so, I've been reflecting on that, and I thought, well, I wonder if that was a hard word for people to hear who their lives right now, it feels like they are in the dust, that they're in the midst of a challenging diagnosis, or, they've lost their job or something. Like, how did they hear these words of Jesus? And I wondered if maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Right. Well, yeah, that's a challenging question and a challenging thing to think about. I think part of what was feeding my mind when I was doing the sermon is I know members of the congregation, but also friends who are really struggling with some things right now. And I have a friend who has cancer and a very serious diagnosis. And I think this friend would describe themselves as being in the dust. And I thought a lot about that. In fact, the friend would say that they were languishing, that their bones were shaking, that they were in terror. They're very fearful about what is happening. And so I think that's a very real feeling, because we bump up against that. We experience that over and over again in life. At least that's my experience. I don't feel like I get through life without having something happen. And I would also encourage anybody who was listening today to maybe name what they were going through, because of the fact that we sometimes just need to say it, out loud. And I think we hear that in the Psalms. But I also think God accepts those prayers, and God accepts those prayers of frustration and sadness, or however, any other way you would label that. When things are falling apart, God is still holding us when we can't even hold on to God. Or even when our faith maybe disappears in that moment, God's still holding on to us, and it's not judging us or, saying, oh, you're not where you should be. God is there with us. And for me, that has allowed me to kind of rest in God's love in the midst of crazy things that have happened in my life, or hard things that have happened in my life. And that has allowed me to kind of find the strength to kind of take it, not solve it all in a day, but take it a day at a time. And so I would encourage people with that to say, just remember, God's holding on to you when you can't hold on to God.
Right. So a powerful image that that God's love isn't dependent on our feeling.
Right.
Like, even though we feel as though God is far away, or that, hey, the stone wall of my life is falling down, and it is laying in the dust, I don't feel that God is there.
Right.
Just because you can't feel that God is there doesn't mean God isn't there. Right? That sometimes we doubt human love. We doubt that our family cares for us, but their love may still be there. And so I think that's a powerful word. If you are going through one of those challenging times, think about Jesus saying about the birth pains. Maybe God is going to birth something new in your life.
And beautiful.
and beautiful.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
well, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Remember, this is our Wednesday tradition now. Around noon, we're going to have a video either of a spiritual practice or looking back at last week's sermon. And we're going to do something different during Advent, but also something special. So please keep this on your calendar and tune in when you can. And have a great week, everybody.